Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. Instead of just one topic, what if we could just freeze time? What if we could capture an entire media ecosystem, all its interconnected stories and ideas, at one single moment? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're about to dissect a narrative built from a whole bunch of sources, all published within just a few days of each other. Let's see what it tells us. And there's one question that hangs over everything we're about to look at. It's the big one, the one that fuels this whole ecosystem. And it's this. What if the official story, the one you get from the government, from the big news outlets, what if it's not just a little off, but fundamentally always wrong? That idea, right there, is the foundation for everything. And when I say a snapshot, I mean it. Our moment in time is incredibly specific. Every single source we're pulling from was published in this tiny 9-day window in early August of 2025. Keeping it this tight lets us see how all these different ideas about war, money, history, health can pop up at almost the same time and weave together into one cohesive worldview. So let's start with the big picture. Our journey begins on the world stage, and the picture these sources paint is, well, pretty stark. It's a world on a knife's edge. A world of high-stakes deals and the very real threat of nuclear war hanging over everyone's heads. Okay, so check this out. This really shows you the kind of whiplash you can get. On the exact same day, August 9th, you have two writers in this space looking at the same president and seeing two totally different realities. On one side, the blog Coffee and COVID is painting Trump as a genius peacemaker, pulling off a historic deal. At the same time, writer Chuck Baldwin sees a reckless warmonger who's dragging the world towards nuclear Armageddon. It's a perfect snapshot of the intense polarization here. So let's dig into that peace deal, at least as it's described in these forces. The plan, reported by Coffee and COVID, would have Russia keep the territories captured, maybe with a few land swaps. But here's the kicker, and it's a point highlighted by both Coffee and COVID and another article in the Expos. Ukraine wasn't even at the table. They weren't invited. And President Zelensky is quoted as saying any deal made without his country is basically a dead solution. All right, now let's flip to that reckless warmonger narrative. To back this up, Chuck Baldwin's article makes a pretty jaw-dropping claim. That President Trump sent out 2 Ohio-class nuclear submarines. And the reason, according to the article, is what's really wild. It wasn't some major military crisis. It was a social media spat with a Russian official. The source presents this as a massive, dangerous escalation over war of words online. And to really hammer home how serious this is perceived to be, Baldwin's piece uses this incredibly stark quote from military analyst Scott Ritter. It's brutal, and it's meant to be. It strips away all the politics and just leaves you with the grim personal horror of what a nuclear war would actually mean. So that fear of things spinning out of control globally, it's happening at home too, at least according to these writers. The narrative now zooms in, from the world stage right down to the American system itself. A system that's seen as completely broken, and it's either time for a massive reboot or maybe just a total crush. And one of the biggest punching bags here is the Federal Reserve. This quote comes from David Stockman, who used to be the U.S. budget director. And he's basically saying, look, even if Trump gets the details wrong sometimes, he's absolutely attacking the right target. For Stockman, the Fed is the villain of the economic story, and its leadership is setting us up for years of pain. But for Stockman, the problem isn't just one person or one bad decision. It's the whole setup. He calls what the Fed does monetary central planning, and his point is pretty simple. How can a tiny committee of just 12 people possibly set the right price for money in a massive, complex global economy? He argues it just doesn't work. The real solution, he says, is to let the free market do its job. So if the system's broken, how do you fix it? Well, according to Jeff Childers at Coffee and COVID, you take a sledgehammer to it. He's really excited about a new executive order he calls a death blow to what he calls the Grant Industrial Complex. The plan is all about taking power away from professional insiders and giving it to political appointees, letting them approve, deny, and even cancel grants and ban funding for things they see as ideological. But for other writers in this space, the rot didn't start recently. What if the problem goes way, way deeper? An article by Andrew Wallace points the finger back to what he calls the coup of 1913. That's the year the Federal Reserve, the income tax, and the direct election of senators all came into being. From this perspective, the system wasn't just broken over time.
It was designed to fail from the very beginning.
Okay, so from these big, broken institutions, the focus narrows even more, down to society itself. And this is where the narrative gets really intense, with claims of secret government operations, battles over history, and some pretty raw social tensions. Writing in the Expose, Dr. Gary Sidley lays out what he describes as the devastating human cost of the COVID lockdowns. The article isn't just about numbers, it's a list of tragedies. We're talking about women and children trapped with abusers, elderly people dying of neglect and loneliness, a massive spike in mental health issues for young people, and even 100,000 kids in the UK who just never went back to school. The core argument is that the cure was worse than the disease. And it's not just about policies you can see. There's this deep worry about what's happening in the shadows. An article by Alan MacLeod in the UNS Review drops this bombshell number: 885. That, it claims, is the minimum number of secret websites the CIA was running, all disguised as something else, to communicate with spies.
And this is the really clever part, according to the article. These weren't what you'd expect. We're talking about harmless-looking fan pages for stuff like soccer, Rastafarian culture, Star Wars, even the old Johnny Carson show. The idea was to create these totally innocent-looking corners of the internet to provide cover for a global intelligence network.
This kind of skepticism of the official story goes deep, even reshaping huge historical events. A piece in the UNS Review takes a hard look at the Gleiwitz incident, the supposed false flag that Germany used as an excuse to invade Poland and kick off World War II. The article's whole argument hinges on the testimony of the main witness, showing how his story allegedly kept changing and changing and changing over 2 decades, calling the whole official history into question. Now, to really understand this media space, you have to look at its full range, and that includes some very raw and provocative views. So, for example, in a piece titled "Black Fatigue and Jewish Supremacy," writer Donald Jeffries presents this argument, directly linking what he calls ghetto culture to a breakdown of civility in society. But, and this is absolutely crucial to understand, that is not the only voice in this conversation. On the very same day, Daniel McAdams wrote a piece about former Congressman Ron Paul, and he describes a completely different philosophy. It's one of patient debate, of seeing your political opponents not as enemies you have to crush, but as potential allies who you just need to persuade. And that brings us to our final stop on this tour. And it's maybe the most personal one of all: our health. This is where that rejection of mainstream official advice really hits home, leading to a search for totally different explanations and cures for the illnesses of modern life. An article by Joachim Bartol, for example, makes a really careful, nuanced point about a weight loss idea involving an amino acid called cysteine. He makes a sharp distinction. On one hand, he says short-term strategic fasting is safe and healthy, a natural survival tool. But on the other hand, trying to deliberately restrict cysteine in your diet long-term, in his words, that's extremely retarded and just plain dangerous. And this last point really ties a lot of the health threads together. One article just lays it out, connecting the rise in autoimmune disorders to 5 core parts of modern life: poor sleep, no sun, sitting around all day, our modern diet, and chronic stress. The argument is clear. Maybe the problem isn't something that needs a new pill, but a lifestyle that's making us sick. So when you pull back and look at the whole picture, this one week in early August 2025, you see it's not just a random collection of angry articles. It's a complex, self-reinforcing worldview where everything connects: global conflict, corrupt institutions, a sick society, and a sick body. And it all leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. When people reject the official narratives on such a huge scale, what exactly rises up to take their place?